Roofing, the new era of property insurance. What do we mean by the new era of property insurance? Well, trust me, it is all screwed up out there. Would everybody agree? We've seen some real changes in the industry, and they're not good. So who are we? We're Suncoast Claims. We're public adjusters. It was founded by Don Wood about 20 years ago. Don used to be an Allstate adjuster, and penance, he said, for the horrible things he had to do, he became a public adjuster. So he started the company. His son, Karl, after he served in airborne in Afghanistan, went back to TCU, got his degree, and followed in Dad's footsteps. He's now the president of our company. Trent is supposed to be here today, but he got called off on a really big claim. I guess that's more important. But Trent's our director of operations. He has an interesting background. He was a State Farm CAT adjuster. Went all over the country, floods, hurricanes, that kind of thing. And after he left State Farm, he started a commercial roofing company in Oklahoma with his brother. His wife got her dream job. They moved to Texas, and I talked him into becoming a public adjuster, and he is now the adjuster whisperer. The guy is just fantastic. He really knows what he's doing, and so he has a lot of experience, and he's who we put on our larger losses. I'm Russ. Last month, I renewed my insurance license for the 38th year. So, yeah, I know it's amazing. How can I possibly be that old? I spent most of my career as did anybody have any sharp objects? No? Good. I was an Allstate agent. I know. It's sad. I sold my agency in 2008 when I saw that company going way downhill, and I got out while the getting was good. And I've been a public adjuster now for going on 8 years. Love what I do. So we're here to talk to you about the challenges that you're facing, but about us a little bit. So we are based in DFW. Again, 19 years, and it should be 20 years. We have 7 licensees on staff. We have 100 years of combined carrier side experience. And that's really important because what you're going to find, and I'm not here to disparage my competitors, but the vast majority of public adjusters have never worked on the other side. We've all been there. We've been at the sausage factory. We see how they make it. It ain't pretty. But that gives us a huge advantage because we know what makes the other side tick, and we use that to our advantage. We're licensed in other states, but one thing that we don't do as a company is pack up our tents and go out of town every time a hurricane hits somewhere. We don't do that. We stay home. We have these other licenses. One of our clients has a property in one of those states. We'll help them, but we don't run away. We stay in Texas. Texas is home. And yes, we do take residential claims, but we are restricted on residential, the DFW area, and they have to be worth at least $25K. And nowadays, it's pretty easy to get to $25K on a residential roof claim. Commercial will go anywhere in the state. The bigger it is, the further we'll travel. Here's our agenda today. Why is policy pitfalls so important to you guys? Doesn't Badger say you shouldn't even be reading the policy, right? Well, that's silly. You should at least know what you're up against and what your client is up against before you start agreeing to help them do work. Who's getting on your roof? You know who's getting on your roof? Not licensed adjusters anymore. I mean, those are becoming rarer than hen's teeth. It's ladder assists, it's building consultants, it's engineers, and all these people are mucking up your claims. And then our last little topic is going to be loose lips sink ships. Simply put, your policy, your client, and you sometimes, and you think you're acting in good faith and you're trying to do great by the customer, and you'll say something that'll screw the claim up. So we're going to try and give you some tips as to what not to do. Let's talk about policy, why policy is so screwed up. And it is very complex, and I think everybody in this room probably is aware of that. You've seen it. So here's what happened. When I was first young agent, the first homeowner policy I sold had a $250 deductible. It was an HOB. And guess what? If you went down to the State Farm or Farmers or Pigs Knuckle Mutual, everybody was selling HOA, HOB, HOC, good, better, best. That's it. It was very simple. So you were pretty much comparing the same policy. And 90% of the policies being sold was an HOB, and it was a good policy. It was a broad form policy, replacement costs. It was wonderful. And then somewhere early 2000, a lady with Farmers Insurance had a pipe break claim and discovered mold where the water damage had occurred. She brought in some environmental guy, and you would have thought she had uranium in her house. This is so super dangerous. You have to get out immediately. You're going to die. Black mold. And she argued, and she hired an attorney and successfully got a full policy limit settlement. House was torn to the foundation because they found mold in the kitchen sink. That's crazy, right? Why? Because the HOB had no limits on mold or fungi, up to policy limits. Cottage industry was born. Everybody and their brother was a black mold specialist. They were running houses in hazmat suits with a vial, taking air samples. And next thing you know, everybody's filing these mold claims. Carriers go, holy crap, this is no bueno. So they go to the TDI and they say, hey, look, you either let us sell alternate policies, we can't sell this HOB in Texas anymore, or we're out. TDI caved. Okay, you can sell other policies. That started what we call file and use. How does that work? Hi, I'm insurance company. Hey, TDI, this is what I want to sell. And TDI goes, okay. So what has that resulted in? There are over 300 admitted homeowner policies on file with TDI right now. And of those 300, there's endorsements that change the language in those 300. It's no damn wonder your policyholders do not have a clue what they have. And frankly, a lot of y'all don't have a clue. And it's okay. It's not your specialty is putting roofs on and doing it right. You shouldn't be a policy expert, but you almost have to be because you don't know what you're getting yourself into. So multiple policy forms, blah, blah, blah. And on the commercial side, this is kind of interesting too. When I was a young agent, if you had a risk that nobody wanted, hey man, I got a firework factory. You know, no insurance company wants to insure that. The state would allow us to sell offshore policies, Lloyd's. They're not regulated in the same way. If you look at a commercial policy, you see the word surplus lines tax. Have you ever seen that on a policy? That is an offshore policy. It's not regulated in the same way. And again, the whole idea was this is for risks that we can't get placed somewhere else with an admitted carrier. Well, darn it, I think 90% of the commercial policies that come across my desk are surplus lines on good risks. Why is that important? Because they can write anything they want in that policy. And the language is super confusing. And it's really scary. And I'm going to show you an example in a bit. It's going to blow your mind. So bottom line, policy language is no longer universal. You can't just lay them next side to side. It doesn't work that way anymore. Hey, appraisal clause, that's a real good one. I think this would be near and dear to y'all's heart. Typical appraisal clause is what? 2 paragraphs. You and we disagree. You know, either side can invoke. You got 15 days to name, blah, blah, blah. It's 2 paragraphs. You see that it's almost boilerplated. No more. Go pick up a farmer's policy. Their appraisal clause is 3.5 pages long. I was at a seminar and a very respected attorney and I were talking about this. She goes, Russ, I had to read that appraisal clause 3 times and I still don't understand it. So if an attorney doesn't understand it, how is your policyholder supposed to understand it? How are you supposed to understand it? Confusing. Here's the most important slide in my part of the presentation. This is the one you really need to set in. At the end of the day, a policy is nothing more than a contract between the policyholder and the insurance company. And anything in that contract is enforceable. I see people on level paper, you just have to go after the agent for errors and omissions because they sold you an ACV on your roof. Wrong. That's not how it works. An error? Hey, Mr. Agent, I'm insuring 123 Main Street. And a claim happens and the policy says 321 Main Street. That's an error. Omission. Hey, I want to insure my Rolex watch. Here's the receipt and blah, blah, blah. They forget to do it. That's an omission. But when that insurance company sends that renewal out to that policyholder, it is the policyholder's responsibility to read the policy and accept the policy by paying the premium. And once they've done that, it's all enforceable. So let's get off this, let's just go after the agent. It's all their fault. It doesn't work. How about this one? Is everybody getting crazy over this? You should. Does everybody in the room understand what the RSPS is? Everybody thinks it's an ACV policy, right? No. No, it's not. It's worse. On a true ACV policy, do they depreciate labor? No. Do they depreciate O&P on an ACV policy? No. Taxes? No. This is not an ACV policy. This is an RCV policy with an endorsement that changes how roofs are paid. And here's a typical one. This is from my old stomping grounds. And here's what I mean by it's worse than ACV. This is the word depreciation doesn't appear on this at all. No depreciation. It doesn't talk about that. What it's saying is, hey, based on the year, age of the roof, and the material, this is the percentage we agree to pay. And guess what? Oh, heck, wrong button. Here. I'm going to read it to y'all. The applicable percentage in this chart will apply to all roof service components and installation, including the applicable overhead, profit, loss, taxes, and fees. Everything gets dinged with the percentage. That's worse than an ACV policy. And guess how many of my customers knew they had this after they had already filed a claim? I can count on one hand and have all 5 fingers left. Nobody has it. Nobody knows they have this. It's bad. This was, so we've got a customer, really beautiful building insured for 11 million something. Big hailstorm. He says, well, the good news is I have a $5,000 deductible. This is his deck page. And if you notice on the deck page, it does. It says $5,000 deductible. Do you see anything on exceptions? Do you see anything about wind or hail on his deck page? Problem is, that's all he read was the deck page. I found on page 163 this. His deductible wasn't $5,000 for wind and hail. It was 5%. His deductible was $570,000 for his wind hail claim. And he had already filed, and he didn't know. This is a smart guy, too. So these are, but again, who would have read to page 163 and found this? Because it's not indicated in the deck at all. You have to dig. That's kind of scary, huh? This one, well, thank God Mason's out of business, but there are other carriers selling. This is probably the nastiest endorsement I've seen. It's worse than the RSPS by a mile. What does this say? Wind or hail hits the house. If it doesn't cause loss of structural integrity, in other words, the house ain't going to fall down, but you got hail damage, dents, it says right on there, dents, scratches, regular hail damage. The coverage is capped at 2% of coverage A, which is what the house is insured for. So if say the house is insured for $200,000, they have $4,000 of wind hail coverage. End of story. Have a nice day. Oh, and this guy, when I told this client this, of course, he hit the roof. I'm calling my agent. His agent said, quote, I don't know what that means, but you're getting a discount for it. How much was the discount, you ask? $36 a year. This guy had a $54,000 roof claim. But he got a discount. This was on a farm ranch. We had this customer that he breeds champion racehorses. Beautiful property. What do most farm and ranches have? Lots of metal buildings. Barns, they had show barn. Okay. He had Chubb. You think, okay, Chubb's good. But this little thing was in there. And this is what's scary. Everybody's seen cosmetic waivers. We all get that. But this one takes it to, this one goes to a new level. And I'm going to read it. They don't cover if this doesn't happen. Damage that penetrates through the roof or siding, which allows penetration of water completely through the roof or siding immediately after the initial damage occurs. In other words, it's got to leak the day it hailed. And there's got to be holes, or they do not pay anything. And what do we say about this? It's what? It's a contract, and it's enforceable. We had this. Oh, this was a really crazy one. We had this condominium complex in Dallas that gets smacked in March of 19. Contractor got it nice and tangled up for us, then handed it to us in July. And we were working it, and we were making some great progress. I mean, we'd already more than doubled the claim. Everything's cruising along. And then October rolls around. Does anybody remember what happened in October of 2019 in Dallas? This old thing called a tornado. Everybody remember the Home Depot that got flattened? It was all on the news. This is across the street from it. Didn't flatten the condo complex, but it caused a lot more damage. So now you got 2 different claims working. Some of it, there's some cross-pollination. We've already got the roof bought, and now the roof's even worse. And so we go and work it, and we get down to February-ish, and the carrier's been dragging heels, and they don't even release payments till 30 days after they agree to pay. They finally release payment March 1, and this clause comes out. To get your RCV, you have to do all the work within 365 days of the date of loss. Not when they pay, not when they agreed to pay. They went all the way back to March 50. These people had 2 weeks to replace their roofs or no RCV. The roofer did a great job. He got out there. We think he got it all done. We did get their RCV back, but again, who would read that? Who would even think about that? And the carrier dragged this thing out. It was all their fault. But when we told them, they said, well, 1, it's a pandemic. 2, they have 2 claims, tornado, labor shortage, materials, and their very polite answer was go jump off a bridge. We don't care. were applying this. They would not give an extension. Okay, disco roofs. Everybody loves disco roofs. You got a Monier tile roof, got 20 broken tiles. What does that usually mean? Replace it all. You can't repair that, right? Not on this policy. It says, in the event of a repair, the above provisions do not require or guarantee a match of roofing or siding materials. The repair is intended to return the damaged property to a pre-loss condition without regard to cosmetic appearance. Materials used to make the repair may vary in color, shading, dimensions, pattern, and composition. Literally anything that'll, as they say, it was the old joke, make it fit. Make it fit. Yeah. So, again, who would ever think to look for that? Our good friends at Farmers, they have an interesting take on disco material. This only applies to siding and comp roofs. But what it says is if you've got, okay, so one side of the house gets directional hail, one side of the house gets hammered, the other house's side is fine, all the siding is old and disco. With Farmers, you actually have to buy a separate endorsement, a limited matching coverage endorsement, and they give you a dollar amount. Now, I've seen plenty of Farmers policies that doesn't even have it on there at all. And if it does, the last one I saw was $5,000. So there goes so that's the cap to do the matching thing with that policy. But again, who reads this stuff? Appraisal. We're not here to beat on appraisal. As public adjusters, we think appraisal is a tool, just like any other tool in our toolbox. It's not our only tool. But the thing that scares me about appraisal is that if it's now, especially because the carriers are changing policy language constantly. For example, with State Farm, if you read the State Farm appraisal clause, if you didn't give them at least 10 days in advance before invoking appraisal, a complete list of everything that you want to appraise, they will toss it all aside. Happened to one of our clients, and it's funny, our client had a beautiful house in North Dallas, tile roof, copper dormers, and they paid for everything but the roof. And the roof was all beat up, but they said it was all footfall, it was thermal expansion, all the crap they try to use for getting out of paying for a tile roof. And this guy was an attorney. And I said, well, normally when I talk to a client about your options, I would say talk to an attorney, before you invoke appraisal, talk to yourself. But I'm telling you, don't go to appraisal with State Farm. He goes, oh, I know, he's smarter than me. Of course, he's an attorney. He went to appraisal. We got a $90-something thousand award. State Farm sent him a check for $6,000. The roof was not to be included in the appraisal, so we're just going to set aside that part of the award. Sorry. And when you go to appraisal, you're setting aside a lot of extra contractual rights. So he's already gone down the rabbit hole. You're done now. This is, and Farmers, their appraisal clause, did you know is this the right one I'm looking at? Oh, yeah. Farmers, you have to use AAA as the umpire service. How is that unbiased? They're determining the umpire before. But it's in the policy. And you bought the policy, so you agreed to the terms. Yeah, that's the State Farm language. That's really important. This is tripping people up. I was talking to one of the attorneys I know last night, and they say, the farm is really batting down the hatches. So if you've got any State Farm appraisals cooking right now, do not be surprised if they don't pay the award. Yeah, exactly. Problem is they've got a lot more money than our side. They got Austin in their pocket. Covered perils, this really applies on water. You can be really careful on water claims. I don't know if you guys do any water claims. Is it backup of sewers or drains? Is it, and if you file, you can potentially completely foobar your claim if you file on the wrong coverage. We've talked about cosmetic waivers. They are getting worse. But you can get around them, but you better have some really good evidence. So bottom line, claims are policy driven. We've already talked about how many. It's 330. I was wrong. I said 300. Covers can be added and taken away at renewal. They send the renewal, and it's a policyholder's responsibility to accept or reject. And my advice to y'all, and I do this all the time for my contractors, if it's just a coverage question and not even a claim for us, please get with a good PA and let them review the policy for you. Somebody who can put their eyes on it and say, here's a problem. Because there's been times I've looked at a policy, said, they've got this super high deductible, it's ACV only, they have none of this, and you start doing the math, it makes no sense to file the claim. And that puts you in a better position than taking your client down that road if they haven't already, filed. But use your resources, and PAs are a great resource, attorneys as well, to understand policy before you make a mistake. And now we're going to listen to Karl. He's much more eloquent than I am. So.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. Clicker.
Thank you. Do a little test click first. There we go. All right. Karl Wood. I'm not wearing my lanyard. Okay, who's getting on your roof? I'm going to cover some of the different individuals and the roles they play, how they can affect your claim. One thing, I just kind of added this as a note, something to think about. If y'all are up on a roof and we're not involved, we do this if we're up there, but if a carrier rep is out there, and you got to just keep track of how long they're out there. If they're on a 200-yard building or something like that, there's hail damage to the roof and exterior, and they're out there for 15 minutes. Just make a little note of that. If you think 15 minutes is enough time to conduct an adequate investigation. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But that's useful information. So I'm going to paint with a pretty broad brush. So when I'm talking about, let's say, carrier engineers, I don't mean every carrier engineer, but certainly a lot of the ones that I have encountered. I'm going to go through some examples just to show you how these different roles can affect your client's claim. So let's start with engineers. I have a BS in mathematics, and now I just BS PA work, but I have a lot of friends who are engineers. I took a lot of the same classes. These are very smart people. I didn't take chemistry because I couldn't figure it out, but they're smart people. But for some reason, when I meet these guys on insurance claims, a lot of that stuff seems to go out the window. They're science-based individuals and supposedly unbiased, but for some reason they always seem to know the policy language, policy dates. You would think if their job is to go out there and determine causation and when it happened, is it damaged? If it's damaged, what caused the damage? And when did that damage occur? I think going into it with a blind eye would make more sense, but that doesn't always happen. So example number one, has anyone seen this picture before? A little old. This is actually before my time. My father worked this claim. I think I was still in high school. You can Google this. It's called The Last House Standing. It was taken from a helicopter by an AP photographer. This is Bolivar Peninsula after Hurricane Ike came through. It wiped out 4,000 homes. There's not another structure standing 4 miles in either direction. This house, it looks okay from here. It's settled 8 inches. There's salt water in the walls on the second floor. There's sand on the second floor. And this blue tank right next to the house, that's a water tank that belonged to the church that's no longer next door. There was a whole street of houses off to the side. Now this guy has oceanfront property. He called my father in tears and said his insurance company has denied his claim. He doesn't know what to do. So my father signs up the claim, and there's an engineer that has been retained by the insurance company. Imagine thinking that you need an engineer to figure out what happened here. So they hire an engineer, whatever his fee is, thousands of dollars. He comes out there. You have to take a ferry to get out here. I don't know if that's still the case. So it's a 3-hour trip out there. He writes his report, wastes another month or two to get his report turned in. And the engineer says, the damage to this structure had nothing to do with the hurricane that came through here and wiped out every other house on the peninsula. The damage happened due to normal seasonal thermal expansion and contraction. He stamps it with his engineering license, sends it off to the insurance company. The insurance company says, well, my expert says this wasn't hurricane damage. They denied his claim. They ended up paying for it. Example number 2, Suncoast was hired on one of the largest buildings I've been in, probably 5 football fields long. Huge metal roof, metal walls. The guy calls us and says we were hit by a tornado. And we get out there, there's roof panels lifted up. wall panels dented, there's overhead doors all the way down the side, and those are blown in. So we see the damage, and we look a little closer. The Z purlins in the roof are bent, twisted. Some of them are snapped off. They're just hanging there. There's 30, 35-foot steel beams holding the roof up, and right in the middle, there's a steel beam sitting on top of a wooden broom handle. I promise it was not installed that way. The roof lifted up. What we think happened, someone set a broomstick up against it. The roof lifted up, the broom handle fell down, and the roof came back down and sat right on top of the broom handle. The insurance company sent out an engineer, as they do, and the engineer produced a report that said, you can repair this, shore it up, it's fine. And for some reason, I've never seen this before, he refused to put his seal on it. He didn't stamp his own report. So we hire an engineer. He happens to be in the area. We say, would you mind coming by here? Something doesn't add up. So he walks in there, and his jaw drops. He's looking around. My God. So he leaves. Later that week, he gives us a one-page engineering report, a lot shorter than the insurance company's engineer. And he says, evacuate the building immediately. It's in imminent danger of collapse. It's not going to take a big storm this time. We send that off to the insurance company, and you would think they'd see that and go, wow, this is a safety issue. This is real dangerous. Instead, they hire 2 additional engineers at the same time. So we're now up to 3 insurance company engineers. And so we're out there with this gaggle of experts, and they're walking around, making little notes on their iPads. They produced 2 additional engineering reports that said this can be repaired. They refused to seal them, so now we've got 3 engineers who refuse to stand by their own work product. The contractor actually attempted one of those temporary repairs, and it failed, damaged some of the tenant's belongings. Anyway, 11 months later, they paid it, $11 million. They paid to tear down the whole structure. I think they may have paid for the slab. Policy limits paid for the slab. Yep. How you doing, Dan? Yeah, it was an older building. The metal was thinner gauge. Code would not allow you to repair it. Example number 3. Anyone in here know what a square is? This is not a trick question. It's a shape, 4 equal sides, 4 90-degree angles, test squares. 10 by 10 test square. You count the number of hail hits in it. It gives you a good sample size of how much hail damage is on the roof. We were hired on a very long rectangular flat roof, nothing special, EPDM roof. And there was a carrier retained engineer who, never seen this before, I haven't seen it since. He said there was half a hail hit per square. Does anyone know the diameter of half a hailstone? So I'm reviewing his report, trying to figure out what the heck that means. And then I get up on the roof, and on one end of the roof, where there wasn't as much hail, it's a real long building. It's much more sporadic over here. He's got a test square, and look at that. He happened to miss all the hail around it. Okay. On the other end of the roof is another test square, except it's not a square. It looked like the state of Florida. He had somehow managed to zig. Yeah, it was 100 square feet in the shape of the state of Florida, and he zigzagged his way through all of these hail hits, and he did his best. God bless him, but he got one hail hit in there. So he's got 2 100 square foot test squares, average of 1/2 a hail hit per square. Denied the claim. So we requested the engineer come back out there, and I said, what is this? And he's kind of mumbles and does his own thing. Additional reinspection, investigation, another half hour. We're standing up there. Meanwhile, the contractor for the homeowner comes up there and says, while you're here, I'm just going to open the roof. So he opens the roof. There's 1 inch of water sitting on top of the ribbed metal roofing. The engineer stares at it, pulls out his digital camera, takes a picture. They bought the claim. Example number 4, this one probably irritates me the most, despite the consequences of the other ones being a little more severe. This is on a residential Little Weechie tile roof, probably $250,000 roof, real nice house, nice roof. I'm hired. I send my notice of representation into the insurance company. The adjuster says, great, I'm going to hire an engineer. I haven't even spoken to this guy yet. First thing he does is hire an engineer. Okay, so we all meet out there. Engineers climbing all over the roof for a couple hours, takes hundreds of pictures. Real nice guy, says he knows my father. We all leave. 2 months later, I get an email from the adjuster. He's got the insurance coverage determination letter, and he's also attached a copy of the engineering report for me to review. It's real nice. So I open the determination letter, and it says, our expert could not find any hail damage. Claim denied. Now, this roof, it's not a new roof, but it's an intact roof. Tiles are still up there. You can see some dirt, some grime, some lichen on them. It's been there for a few years. In addition to those things you can see freshly exposed clay tile, bright, beautiful orange red. This is fresh damage. This is recent damage. Something hit this roof. So I assumed that he saw the same damage as I saw. Maybe that was a mistake. So they denied the claim. Let me look at the engineering report. Maybe I missed something. I open the engineering report, and on page 1, he's got the wrong date of loss. Not even close. He's off by 2 months. Maybe that's a typo. Let's keep reading. The next page, he's got the wrong date of loss again. Then he's got weather data citing the wrong date of loss. And he says, look, it's a bright sunny day. Well, that makes sense. If it's a sunny day, someone says, hailstone just hit me on the head. That doesn't make any sense. There's not a cloud in the sky. That's logic. I like logic. What is also logical is that if he sees weather data that shows not a storm in 100 miles from this house, then he's going to have to find some reason, some way of attributing all the damage that we observed to something other than hail. So what caused it? He listed we call it the laundry list denial. And for some reason, the laundry list, on the whole list, there's not a covered cause of loss on there. Spalling, foot traffic, wear and tear, expansion and contraction, everything but a covered cause of loss. It's funny how that works out. In addition to the data loss, which is the worst error, because you can imagine if he had looked at the correct data loss, he'd see there's a 1.5 to 2 inch hailstorm that went right over the property. Maybe that caused the damage. He's also got pictures. He took hundreds of pictures, really good pictures of damage. But he's got pictures of the roof over here. Under each picture is a caption. It says no visible damage. So I went through every single picture this guy included, and I like Microsoft Paint. I just put nice little red circles. Here's a fractured tile. Here's a missing corner. Here's a chunk of tile laying in the gutter. Is this not damage? Is this how it was installed? By the time I was done, I had a 79-page rebuttal letter full of all the inconsistencies that I found. And on the first page was the worst one, the data loss. I send this over to the adjuster, and I say, I think you need to take a look at this engineering report. The adjuster responds to my email in 11 minutes and says, my position remains the same. So I responded, I don't think you read my report. And for some reason, he responds in writing. I can't believe he did this. And he says, you're right. I did not read your report. I have since read it, and my position remains the same. Okay, so he's admitted to ignoring evidence. That's nice. He calls the engineer, because I followed up on that too, and I said, this is a catastrophic error in his findings. He calls the engineer, and then he gets back to me and says, oh, he said it was a typo. No, it's not. If it was a typo, then he would have pulled the weather data from the correct data loss, and he wouldn't have repeated it multiple times throughout his report. And you, Mr. Adjuster, knew that it was the wrong data loss because in your denial letter, you used the correct data loss. So these are the games that they play. These are just 4 examples. I got to move on before I get heated. Carrier engineers, if they tell you or your client they're going to send an engineer out, call us or your favorite trusted PA. If the claim is large or complex where you anticipate they might send out an engineer, call us. These, I like using the fishing line example. We can untangle fishing lines, but it's a lot easier if we don't have to. Carrier engineers are like knots in a fishing line. And they encompass most of my examples because they cause a lot of these problems. But we're going to move on. Ladder assists. What are ladder assists? They're the guys that put ladders up on the gutters and scrape them around and stuff. I've seen that before. They are fact gatherers for the insurance company. In Texas, at least, they don't have to send out licensed adjusters. They don't have to have a license to go out there and take pictures. They are there to take pictures and scope notes for the insurance adjuster, the desk adjuster. They can't bind coverage. They can't read and interpret policy. So that seems fine, but what if they don't know how to take good pictures? What if their thumb's over the camera? It's a blurry picture. What if they don't know how to prepare a proper scope, or they don't go inside and look at the leaks? Maybe they don't get in the attic, see if there's any leaks. They don't check for valley metal. So if you're out there with a ladder assist, just keep an eye on them, see what they're doing. Give that feedback to us if necessary. Independent adjusters. What is an independent adjuster? Well, there's three types of adjusters. There's public adjusters that represent the insured, the policyholder only, exclusively. There are staff adjusters that work for insurance companies. They're captive employees of insurance companies. And there are independent adjusters, which is a misnomer. Independent does not mean they're independent-minded, although some of them may be. Independent just means they're independent contractors, so the insurance company doesn't have to pay to keep them on staff. When they have a loss, they'll pay them to do that one job and they're done. They work exclusively for insurance companies. Doesn't mean they're easy or difficult to work with. They can read and interpret policy. They can prepare estimates. They can recommend payments. They cannot bind the insurance company to coverage. They can recommend something to the desk adjuster, and the desk adjuster can say, no thanks. Consultants, there's a couple types here. There's specialty consultants, like HVACIs. Anyone heard of them? Good. Yeah, no one's heard of them. There's asbestos consultants, anything that requires a specialty trade, window specialists. Sometimes there are generic building consultants, Young and Associates, one that comes to mind. The generic building consultants are similar to independent adjusters, except if they're not licensed, they can't read and interpret policy, although some of them will try. I've seen a building consultant attempt to garner a release agreement from the policyholder, which did not fly with us. Yeah, so they're similar to IAs. They're a little more restricted. They cannot bind the insurance company to coverage. They can provide recommendations and reports and estimates and all that good stuff. Preferred providers. I'm not trying to step on any toes here. I don't know if this applies to anyone, but preferred providers, the insurance company will tell the insured, if you have a loss, here's a list of preferred providers we've vetted, and we will stand by their work. Has anyone heard the expression, don't bite the hand that feeds you? And human nature, those two things go hand in hand. So if the insurance company is saying they'll do the work for X, I've heard, I don't know how many times, I can find an adjuster will say, I can find a contractor who'll do that for half the price. That's nice. I can find a contractor who will do the work incorrectly, or they'll reuse old materials, or they'll cut corners, or they don't have insurance. You know, it goes both ways. Doesn't mean they're all bad, just something to keep an eye out for. And if you're meeting with your client, maybe talk about this and let them know, hey, the adjuster may come by and recommend someone else. There's a reason they're recommending them, potentially. All right, so that's the end of my portion. Now I'm going to do my best Trent Gagnon impression, because he's not here. He's working on a big claim. All right, so loose lips sink ships. You have the right to remain silent. You don't have to volunteer information to the adjuster if y'all are meeting them out there, if we're not out there. Here in Texas, we're all pretty friendly. We think sometimes volunteering information can be helpful. Maybe if I'm nice to the adjuster, they'll pay the claim properly. That might happen, but you might mess up the claim. So, for example, an adjuster says, how long has this leak been here? And maybe you've been doing repairs for this client for 10 years, and you say, oh, that leak's been there 5 years. Well, it's possible for this leak to be 5 years old, and for the roof to have brand new damage and new leaks that they should pay for. Maybe this leak, the adjuster doesn't know, is because of a drip pan under a HVAC unit in the attic or something. That's not a covered cause of loss, but it's there. And now the adjuster is going down this rabbit hole of contractor said it was 5 years old. That was before our policy. We don't know for this. We can overcome that, but it makes it more difficult. Avoid landmines. If you're guessing, you're wrong, even if your guess is right. Date of lots issues. We see it all the time. Someone prints off a hail strike report and they say, that looks like a nice juicy hail date right there. Let's go with that one. File the claim for this date of loss. Does the policy period cover that? Does that policy cover hail? Is it the one Russ talked about where when the policy changed, it shifted from a $5,000 hail deductible to a $570,000 hail deductible? These things matter. Repair history. You might say maybe you're not familiar with who the client used in the past and you're just guessing. Yeah, I think they did an overlay on the roof about 4 years ago. Well, there's hail damage to the overlay. It's on the roof. 4 years ago. Well, now the adjuster has a 4-year window in which he can try and place that hail event. Maybe their policy only goes back 3 years. They only had this carrier for 3 years, and now it's on someone else's shoulders. But if the overlay is actually 1 year old and you just guessed incorrectly, we have to overcome that. Because if the overlay is 1 year old and it's got hail damage on it, well, now you know the hail is no older than 1 year. That's actually helpful. Who owns the building? Insured interest issues pop up all the time. Don't guess. It complicates things. Don't compromise on repairs with the adjuster. Now, when I say don't negotiate, I'm not talking about UPA. I'm talking about negotiating against yourself, just as a general best practice. You should know your own margins, know what your overhead is, know what profit margins you need to make to stay in business on every job. And if you know it's going to cost $10,000 to do a job and the adjuster says, can you do it for $8,000? No, my price is $10,000. That's your price is your price is your price. They don't need any help paying less on a claim. If you say, I think they can just put an elastomeric coating on this or just replace a few shingles, just trying to be helpful, they might think, oh, that's contractor said they can do all the repairs for that. No, those are temporary repairs. Until they adjust the claim properly, a temporary repair is just the client doing their duties to further mitigate the claim until the insurance company pays what they owe. Don't underbid. If you lock yourself in, if you say, I can do this roof for $10,000, and then you start the repairs and you realize the decking is rotten, it's not a nailable surface, but you've committed to doing it for $10,000, just be careful. We all have specialties. I'm not an expert in everything. If there's a roof claim and you think this is just a roof claim, potentially, maybe there's something else going on that when we get hired on a claim, we have to look at the whole policy and the whole claim and do our best to make sure that the insured is getting everything that they're owed under the policy. So let's say you have a dentist's office or something. They've got asbestos ceiling tiles. Who put those in? But they've got a roof leak, and you think this is just a roof claim. Well, maybe not. Now they've got asbestos abatement. They've got to shut down their business for however long it takes to clear that out. Now you've got business interruption, interior damage, and roofing. You don't want to waive your client's policy benefits on accident by trying to be friendly with the adjuster or by missing damage. If you suspect there's something else outside of the scope of what you're familiar with, give us a call. We'll talk you through it. Outside consultants. I had a potential client, residential claim. He called me and said, hey, my insurance company sent out an engineer who denied my claim, and I hired my own engineer who looked at the carrier engineering report and said, this is the best report I've ever seen. This report is extremely accurate. This is a great engineering report. It's almost like the guys were best friends. What can you do to help me? Well, now he's got his own engineer who's agreeing with the insurance company's engineer. 2 expert reports on file. I don't know who this guy is that he hired, by the way. 2 expert reports on file, both of them saying he's not owed anything from the insurance company. what am I supposed to do with a claim when it gets to me like that? That is what we call an uphill battle. Just be careful when you introduce someone, again, trying to be helpful, and it turns sideways. Half a roof situation. Russ, correct me if I'm wrong on this one. Trent was supposed to cover this one. We had a client who they had the back half of the roof was damaged. This is before we were introduced to him. Back half was damaged by hail. Insurance company said, there's nothing on the front. We'll pay for the back. Here's your leftover after deductible. And the client said, oh, thanks. I'll wait for another bigger storm and try and get the whole roof paid for. Well, they got hit again. They didn't do the repairs. And this time the front of the house got hit and the back again, right? The insurance adjuster comes out there and says, you're right, the front of the house is hit. Let me look at the back. Oh, those are the same damaged shingles that we've already paid for, so we're not paying for those a second time, but we'll pay for this front one because it's a new claim. Here's your other deductible. So now, in effect, they paid for the whole roof and he's getting charged with 2 deductibles. So if you have the opportunity to do repairs when there's damage, do the repairs if possible, if the client can afford it. After that first claim, you don't want to get surprised by this situation popping up. Timer, yeah, 9:49, we're good. That's all I've got. That's all Trent's got.
I'm going to add something on the independent adjusters. You know, in the past, IAs were paid a percentage, kind of like we are. Get that has stopped. The carriers are now paying them a flat fee. And think about it. If they're going to get paid the same to deny the claim or to pay the claim, and they want their phone to keep ringing, I think that makes them biased now because there's no financial incentive for them to pay, but there's a financial disincentive for them to start buying stuff because the carriers go, we're losing your number. So that's an important thing when you're dealing with these IAs. The other thing that was interesting on the consulting thing, we had a pretty good sized claim, and our number was here. The contractor's number was in line with our number. The carrier sends out a consultant to do a competitive bid. Have you ran up against that? And his number was half. And my policyholder was smart. He goes, okay, that sounds like a great deal. I'm hiring you right now. You say you'll fix my building for that number. And the guy went, well, no, I'm not here to do the job. I'm just here to price the job. But you're a contractor, right? He goes, yeah. And you say it's this. He goes, yes. He goes, okay, I'm hiring you. Let's do it for that. I'll sign the contract right now. And the guy went, oh, and disappeared. So be careful when you get these competitive bids from basically your competitors. If they're not really willing to do the work, that bid is worth nothing. But the carriers will stand by it. So be careful with building consultants. Do we have any questions? We got a couple minutes because you know Badger's coming. Where is he? Sir, I'm sorry. First hand I saw. Yes, sir. No. Correct. Right. Ooh.
How can you make this where you send that engineer after like you're on notice, like
Yeah.
you better do this right. You're like, we know what we're doing too. Is there anything we can kind of set that table out with that?
I have a perfect person to answer that question. It's one of my favorite attorneys. He's right there. No, I'm glad you did.
That's a great question, and the answer is, unfortunately, no, there's not much you can do. The reality is the insurer has an obligation in the policy to cooperate and provide access to the property. There is some case law on, we see it all in the forums, this in-depth questionnaire on you must do this and swear to this and give me all this and insurance. Guess what? You can't really put strictures on who can inspect, when, and how. It's a great idea to say, look, buddy, we're watching you, but you run the risk of running afoul of cooperation and inspection clause. The insurance company, when we do presentation, I have a picture of an old lady with a tray of cookies. The insurance company can send their grandmother out with a tray of cookies to inspect, and there's nothing you can do to stop it or to prevent it or to in any way interfere with it. The way you do it is you document that. You just ask the guy, hey, do you have a license? Are you an engineer? Very casually, no big deal. And licensure, proof of neutrality, not going to really do you any good, honestly, in a typical claims context.
It's exactly how I was going to answer, but I prefer the attorney to answer. It's just a race to the bottom, isn't it? It's a race. It's a race to the bottom. Yeah, because of course, you know, and State Auto just got bought out, so all their policies are going to be safe, and then it'll be Symbility. Yeah. I mean, we use Xactimate only because it's kind of it's easier not to argue when you're using the same program. I don't even know if we have access to Symbility pricing. But just like Xactimate, I think probably with Symbility is just how you put the data in, you know. But you're right. It's garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. Correct. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. Sir. No. Correct. Yeah, no, you don't have the right to request that.
There's no affirmative duty that the carriers send a license to anybody. I wish there were, but there's no legal, statutory, or policy right for you to say, I demand blank. There's no right to demand an inspection, period. The carrier has no policy obligation to inspect. Now, whether that runs afoul of the insurance code's requirement that they do not deny the claim without undertaking a reasonable investigation, there's a question there. But there is no affirmative right to demand anybody inspect, regardless of licensure or anything. I wish there were, but there is no legal requirement to that effect.
Yeah, one of the best things you can do is just observe and take notes. We have a claim where they alleged that they inspected the entire interior of this particular facility, but half the facility is locked, and you need to be escorted by a member of someone who has the keys. So we know that they didn't. There was a follow-up inspection where I was in attendance for the whole walkthrough, and they skipped 2 entire sections of the facility, and I just made a little note on my phone, and then we got their report, and it says, we inspected every X, Y, and Z. And I know that that is not true because I was there for 7 hours with them. Hopefully y'all aren't doing 7-hour walkthroughs, but.
Before they brought us out here, I'm going to leave some of my cards on the spray back there. Please grab them if you have a question or something.
Here's the thing, feedback on the current push that we're seeing is they're even calling our subcontractors firm estimates. They are accepting only the subcontractor estimate, receiving that pay 10,000. They pay us 10, they want us to pay them 10. Now you know what we while using us as a pass-through with the BOCC. Any thoughts other than
Yeah, I mean, they ask for that all the time. Show me your sub bids. Right. Yeah, I don't think there's anything you can do. Right. So you're proving that you're hiring subs, and then they're saying you're not actually incurring the cost of over.
Have you ever seen in a policy where it says a claim has to be complex? Does it say have multiple claims? It's not in the policy.
Yeah, that they have right. What side of the bed did they wake up on? We've heard the goalposts keep moving. It used to be how many trades are there? Until I had one that had 11 trades, and they said, well, it's just a residential, so it's not complex enough. Okay, well, complex to who? Complex to you, the adjuster, who probably is not put on a roof, and right. Or does it have to be complex for the single mother who's working 2 jobs, who? Right. Yep.
I have seen a policy that actually says that. They pay on people not on roof.
Yep. This homeowner has to coordinate the trades. They don't know if the work was done to standard, to code, to manufacturer specs. They don't know, they've got to make sure that they all show up in time, the materials get delivered. So, yeah, if they pay the homeowner OMP, and by the way, they don't do this all the time, so it's going to take a lot longer. So those numbers are going to go up, and 10 and 10 is made up. It's arbitrary. Everyone's got different margins. So, arbitrary pricing and arbitrary application. Sir?
Well, just a quick story was about the insurance. I had a good friend, my son's friend's mom called me and said, hey, my roof needs to be replaced. So I get them to the roof, it's a 30-year roof. Why? 2-year roof. They had sent her a letter saying that you have to replace your roof, otherwise we're going to discontinue your insurance coverage. Okay? There was 2 paths that I could take. One's the easy one, so I took the least travel path. So I told her, make the claim. I'll meet the insurance adjuster here. Do y'all know what I was trying to do? So like he gets up there again. Roof's fine, right? So if you know what, so he gets up there and I don't say anything. You keep your mouth shut. That's what I train my son. Don't say one word to him. So you let him do his inspections. He goes around, checks the whole roof. I already had done that already. There's not one damage. Okay? And I was waiting for him to do this. So he goes over there and he does the 0, 0, 0, and goes and goes. And now I know I've done it.
Mhm.
And he said, I'm sorry, Mr. Oliva, but I don't see the damage that you see. I said, to be honest with you, I'm going to tell you why we're up here. I said, we're up here because your insurance company sent a letter telling the homeowner that she had to replace the roof. And you have to think, I think like as an attorney. And that's exactly what I told her. That she has to replace it. Otherwise, her insurance is going to be discontinued. And he just looks at me and said, can you give me a minute? And he goes, so he gets it installed, it goes over to the other side of the roof, we're like this, goes on the other side, and he does this. So Oliva, have fun replacing the roof. And leave.
That's clever.
We had one just like that. The guy, you have a claim going, they deny the roof, nothing wrong with this roof, and then gets a renewal letter saying, you're going to be non-renewed, you don't replace the roof. It's fine.
Could have taken the easy route. What is that?
This one was already down that road. It was way down.
Call the insurance and tell them that they said the wrong.
Well, I think we're getting the hook. So
Hey, if it's not us,